So I'm Dr. Teresa White. I'm the current chair of the Africana Studies Department. This is my second year. And I am extremely delighted to have our special guest here. This is a monumental event, I would say. There hasn't been a time in our history, in the history of Africana Studies, where we've had the latitude to have this particular esteemed panel of individuals come and join us and share their history and share their experiences with Africana Studies. So this is, of course, I don't know, this is maybe event number 16 or 17 for Black History Month. We've been celebrating Black History Month all month. Not to say that we only relegate it to February, we celebrate Black history all year long. But I think in terms of celebratory events taking place on campus, it's probably, I don't know, number 15 or 16 event. And so it's all about the historical legacy of Africana Studies. So Africana Studies, this is, it's going to be our 50th year next year. 2019 will be 50 years in terms of legacy of Africana Studies. So again, this is a profound occasion for us. And I'd just like to introduce our esteemed panel before we begin. So on my immediate right here is Professor James Emerson Dennis. He is a graduate of CSUN, having gone to Cal State Los Angeles prior to that, where he got his BA. He was a member of the core National Board. He's hello, come on in, Please join us right in the front here. Great. So he participated in the Freedom Ride from Nashville to Mississippi on Greyhound bus in 1961, and he has been the chair of the Africana Studies Department. I'll tell you this here in just a moment.
To the side, to the front. Don't be shy.
Don't be shy, don't be shy.
If there's a seat next to you, raise your hand. If there's a seat next to you, raise your hand.
Raise your hand. Everybody see it? Okay.
80 to 81, 80 to 86.
80 to 86. 90-49 child. He was the esteemed chair of Africana Studies during that time. So we move right next to him. This is Dr. Selassie Williams. He is just retired in the summer of 2017 from his most recent position as the Provost and Vice President of Academic Affairs at Lesley University in Cambridge, Massachusetts. He was there for 6 years.
You almost said
Almost said Mississippi. Absolutely. So in that role, he played a major role in formulating and implementing the university's strategic plan. He developed policies and procedures for enhancing academic advisement, he worked with program reviews, etc. He's a strong proponent of international education, as am I. He established a Center for Global Education with the goal to increase study abroad opportunities. In addition, he signed a revenue sharing agreement with the Learning House to market recruitment for fully online programs there. He he helped to shape and develop the Urban Scholars Initiative, a program that provides 4-year financial, academic, and personal support for 20 to 25-year-old low-income first-generation students. He was in Boston, Cambridge. And he has developed unique collaborations with 15 community organizations. As a member, a faculty member, he made his way up from assistant professor to associate professor to full professor. He was among a list of positions. He's Director of African American Studies at the University of Washington, Director of Minority Studies at the University of Wisconsin-Parkside, and again, he was the chairman of Africana Studies here at CSUN. Tell me what years you were the chair.
Pan-African Studies then.
Pan-African Studies then.
1988 to 94.
1988 to 94. All right.
Quick ran away.
Yeah.
Okay, and to his right, we have Dr. David Horn. David Horn went to UCLA. He has a PhD in history and political economy, and he has a master's from the University of Florida in history and in history of South Africa. He is our resident Pan-Africanist, as many of you probably know. He's a faculty advisor. He was a faculty advisor for many years for the Black Student Union. He is also the faculty advisor for the Model African Union and also Model African Union Honors Society, a group on campus who have won awards in their competitions in Washington, D.C. He's been teaching here for more than 21 years, and he was the chair from 1997 to 2000, and then again for a one-year term from 2014 to 2015. He's taught all kinds of classes, almost every class here at CSUN, 100, 204, 271, 366, so forth and so on. I can name you that are familiar. He's also an advocate, a traveler, global traveler, and has traveled to 20 different countries on the continent of Africa. Just to name a few: Nigeria, Ghana, Liberia, Tanzania, Zanzibar, Zambia. I can go on and on. Dr. Horn is retiring from the Africana Studies department at the end of this semester. Maybe we'll keep him for a while. Maybe he'll be part-time, but full-time. As a full-time professor, as a full-time professor, this is Dr. Horn's last semester, so it is particularly important for us. And it pulls on my heartstrings to know that I've been in the company of this gentleman since I came here in 2008, and this will be his last semester with us. So we want to take advantage of him while he's here, not of him, but of his expertise. All right, so to his right is Dr. Tom Spencer Walters. So there's an interesting trajectory here because, let me get it right. So Tom Spencer Walters hired me, and Dr. Williams hired Tom Spencer. No. Let me get it straight. Who hired who? Professor Dennis hired Dr. Walters.
Yes.
And you brought Dr. Williams, okay, and then Dr. Horn.
Came right after, Dr. Williams left.
Came right, okay.
Yeah,
So we have
he left
a
us
sequence of those, right? Okay, we have some other chairs in between. I'll tell you the names of those. Many of you know them. But next to Dr. Horn, of course, is Dr. Tom Spencer Walters. So he received his doctorate from the University of Washington in Seattle in 1983. He was a United Nations Fellow before joining faculty at CSUN, and he developed and he runs the Africana Studies Writing Center. How many of you guys have been to the Writing Center? How many of you guys have it or will? Soon, great, okay. And our reference library. Okay, and he teaches courses in composition, African and Caribbean literatures and cultures. He was also appointed the resident director for the CSU International Program at the University of Zimbabwe in 1994. And he was awarded the Senior Fulbright Scholar Award to teach and do research at the university in South Africa. He was elected to the position of chair in Africana Studies in 2001. He served for 3 years. I don't think anybody has served for 3 years.
3 terms.
3 terms, excuse me. 3 terms, 3 years each, 9 years. I think he's the longest serving chair. So you guys can correct me if I'm wrong. I'm trying to do my homework. Correct me if I stumble at any point. And so he's been one of the longest serving chairs. He was a statewide representative to the International Programs Council at CSU Long Beach. He's published extensively and is currently finishing another book on language variation in the African American community. All of them have published quite prolifically. And he has joined the CSU's early retirement program, to my chagrin. He is halfway through. We have a retirement program where faculty, before they officially retire, they sail away into the sunset. They stay in a few classes. So Dr. Spencer Walters is here in the second year of birthing? Third, see? I don't want to count. I don't want to count. But he remains active in our department's administrative and curricular agenda. He is also the College of Social Behavioral Ombudsman. So he is the individual, if you have any sort of challenges, anything you want to speak to him about personally or what have you, he's the person who he'll keep everything that you tell him in confidence. So he is our confidant for the college. And then to his right, we have one of our most senior lecturers. This is Professor Monica Turner. She received her bachelor's and her master's in communication studies from CSUN Northridge, so she is a true matador. She focuses on performance. She's quite the performer, quite the actress. Many of you maybe have seen her in a few pieces. Her area of specialty is also in language and cultural studies, and which she uses to transform social arenas into cultural forums to engage participants in the struggle against structural inequality. She has been a lecturer in the department. She now, where she takes performance in the classroom as a tool for empowerment for her students the students in their process of knowing and learning. She's also been a real strong advocate for EOP. Many of you may have taken classes with her. She teaches public speaking. She's sort of taken over that realm, even more so since I'm no longer teaching. And so she is one of our most dedicated lecturers in our department. So without further ado, let's welcome our esteemed panel. So a few things I just wanted to put into context because we're talking about a historical legacy. So I said that our department is going to be 50 years next year. So in 1969, our department was created, of course, through the struggles and the demands of BSU, of students, of black students here on campus. I mean, how many of you have seen Stormy Valley State? Okay, how many of you guys are going to see Stormy Valley State before Black History Month is over? Raise your hand, please. Please do. It's on YouTube. You can see Stormy Valley State. It's important. It's important in terms of the legacy of this department and all of the ethnic studies departments on CSUN's campus. It's important in terms of heightening the awareness and heightening the consciousness in the ways in which that students, particularly, students of color particularly, but there was also all kinds of people wanted to push the needle, push the envelope to ensure that we had ethnic studies departments, that would ensure that we had black faculty teaching students, to ensure that we had a curriculum that spoke to the African diasporic experience. So it was born out of that struggle in 1969. So it was called Afro-American Studies at the time, right? The degree was Afro-American Studies. In the spring of 1970, most of the faculty decided that they wanted the department to be called Pan-African Studies. And that was based on the African movement as well as the struggle against apartheid, right? So it remained that way until 1998. In 1998, the faculty decided that the degree would be called African American Studies. The department was still called Pan-African Studies. Stayed that way until 2014. So in 2014, it was decided, the students were feeling, and we were also feeling there's a little discontinuity between what the degree says and what the department is. And then also the chancellor wanted to have some sort of a unifying cohesiveness among the CSU departments. Not all of them changed their names, but a good percentage of them are called Africana Studies. So in 2014, the baccalaureate degree was changed to Africana Studies and then also the department so that it's in unison when the student graduates. Their actual piece of paper says the department, the name of the department. So that just sort of puts things into context. So we have evolved over time in terms of the name. Usually names mean something, right? The naming of things means something. It usually has something with what's going on, what's happening at that particular point in time. And so names shift. Even if you think about the names that are assigned to those that are of black descent. Those names have shifted over time. So as you can see, the leadership shifted over time considerably during that period. I am the fourth female to be at the helm of the department. There's only one other that has served a full term, that's Dr. Karen Stanford. Many of you probably know Dr. Stanford, have taken classes with her. And then another colleague, Rosenstein Purnell, and then also Sylvia McCauley, who is still here at the university. She was here for a short period, for a year. But other than that, there have been 4 females, and I think there have been 13 males at the helm since we started. So again, I'm delighted to be here. I'm honored to be in the company of all of you. There's so much that I can learn. It's an important position to be in, and so I stand humbled before you, just knowing that I'm following in the history of such esteemed gentlemen, and then also with my colleague Professor Turner, who has a rich textured story to share because she has been a student and she's been a lecturer, she's been involved, so she's got a nice perspective to share. So I just wanted to start off by starting from the beginning with Professor Dennis. And why don't you just tell me your thinking about, let's start at the beginning because, you know, we were born from the Stormy Valley State and the struggle. Tell me your thoughts about the level of student activism and the level of active engagement that students exhibited during that period of time, and then also during the time when you were chair. What was it like for you to come to Africana Studies? What are some of the most significant and salient memories that you have as chair in this department?
May I make some corrections first?
Oh, absolutely, please. I have no problem being corrected, absolutely.
We changed to Pan-African Studies the second year because we decided that African American history didn't start in 1619. And after that, we brought in a Pan-Africanist, and we changed the curriculum, and every class had some Pan-African, something about the Pan-African world in it. Barbara Rose was the first woman, female chair, 1970. 1976 and 1979. And I followed her in 1980. And what else? Yeah, you know, I'm getting old.
That's okay, take your time.
And if I don't write it down, sometimes I forget it. Although history, I kind of keep it in order because my family thinks that I have a great memory for dates, and so I keep with dates in my mind. But what is it? Give me a question again.
I ask you, what are your thoughts about
student
the creation, student activism, active
Well,
student engagement at that time and the time that you were chair?
I came to the campus because of civil rights movement. Because when I graduated from high school in 1953, I was before Brown versus Board of Education, and down south where I'm from, if you're a professional, other than a doctor, a lawyer, a preacher, you were a teacher. That's about the only professional job you could get. And I decided I didn't want to teach. And so when I graduated from Cal State LA in 1961, I had a job teaching. I turned it down. And but after the movement, I started running into youngsters who was like the first generation of black folk who ignored the past. They started acting like the world didn't start until they were born. And so I said, well, one way I can deal with this, I can go, the job was over at Cal State Northridge and at Cal State LA. Cal State Northridge called me first. Because kind of like prior to EOP and they started bringing back students here, it was about 1968. I know a lady who got a degree from here in the early 60s. And there was no black students on this campus. And she saw a dark-skinned Indian one day, and she said, "Oh Lord, let me run down here and speak." And come find out it was an Indian. But she didn't run into any black students at that time. So students came to San Fernando Valley in 1968. Then they had a problem because they had some football players. And football players, one got kicked on the football, coach kicked him on the football field during the game. So they went to see what they could do about it. And of course they realized that they went to the guy over at the director of athletics, and they told him to go to see the president. They did. They told him the president wasn't there, so they said, "Well, we'll hold you here until the president comes." And that's how they got charged with kidnapping and stuff. But when it boiled down, they called it Valley State 19. When it boiled down to it, only four people I think went to jail, actually went to jail. There was, at that time, the name was Arthur Chapman, Wazo, I forgot Wazo's last name, and I forgot the third brother's name, but there was three that actually went to jail, and then Bill Burwell, who was also a student here at the time, went to jail for demonstrations that took place in January. And so those are the four people who went to jail. And you may have to remind me what I'm talking about.
I'm talking about student engagement. What I'm trying to get is a trajectory of student engagement from then till
The
now.
students were involved because they were the second part of the civil rights movement. And, but I want to also say that the community was involved. When the kids got arrested, before they got arrested, when they knew they were going to be arrested, like Burwell and folks, they hit them out over the corner. And the committee that put the department together included people from the community, students, some faculty, and we had good faculty at that time. The good faculty on campus had all the Jews. And that, I don't know whether that's the case now, but what I can get and hear from what's going on here, the ones in charge now are not good.
You're not in charge of Africana Studies. You're in charge at the university.
At the university. Well, it is not our tradition for them to be in charge. Every time, but we always had presidents to back us up. If somebody messed with us, we went to the president. Cleary got his job because of the student movement. Cleary was the president at the time. He got his job. That's why the job was open. Because the president, named after the library, stepped down and his job was open, and Cleary got the job because everything he must have told him he could deal with color folks. We were colored back in those days. We've been colored in black and hump, darkest, and nigger. I use the word nigger freely, and will always use it. I understand what it means. All these people want to do away with it, they don't understand what it means. Till black folks stop acting like niggas, they're niggas.
So that's
Another thing I said when I came to campus, that I would not lie. I would not tell a lie. I was soft, tell black folks, not white folks. And so I haven't changed that, y'all. This is the world as I see it. I was born in 1935, graduated from high school in 1953. Went to the Air Force for 3 years, 9 months, 25 days, 30 minutes. And graduated in 1961, 4 years after I should have graduated. Graduated just in time for the freedom ride. And I didn't, oh, that other thing I want to correct you. I didn't ride a bus from Nashville. I rode a Delta airplane to New Orleans and a train to I just talked to the guy who wrote the book, and that's one of the changes he's making a new edition.
okay, good.
That he's gonna do. I was by myself, no one else was with me. I got on Delta airplane. At that time, they used to throw champagne all the way on your flight. Except that I didn't drink champagne. Yeah, I never got cultivated into the liquor. I just found out that this country could push your liquor. You know, if you watch cowboy movies like I do, every time they come in town, the first thing they have to do is get a drink. And they just drink it like they're drinking soda pop. I tasted it, and it don't taste like something.
So on that note, we're going to come back to the presentation. You know, there's lots to share. Anecdotes and great, wonderful, rich perspectives. So we're going to, in chronological order, be Dr. Walters. Yes. Next is Dr. Selassie Williams.
So you want me to address the same question?
Would you? So we're asking about student activism and student engagement.
So number one, I was not here in 1968, so I was not a part of that student struggle. I was at the University of Wisconsin, engaged in the same struggle there. So I think it's important to put into context that this was not the only campus where this struggle was going on for Black Studies and for EOP programs and the like. It was really the educational arm of the civil rights movement. And so we all understood as young people at that point in time that we were engaged in the struggle for the black mind. That the American higher education was such a homogeneous enterprise that anyone coming into this university or any other university in the United States was simply going to be indoctrinated into a Eurocentric perspectives and Eurocentric content. We realized that we needed to change that format, that framework, in order for us to be liberated as a people. And so it wasn't a matter of just getting people in the door so that they could get a job somewhere. It was about trying to transform American higher education. And by doing so, trying to create what I would call a more humane, equitable, and just society by changing the nature of the way people thought about each other and the way they thought about themselves. So that was a critical piece of it. I also want to piggyback on what Jim said a minute ago, how critical it was for the community to be involved. If the community was not involved, then the students who were demonstrating on the campus were simply isolated. And it was very easy for the police, either the police department, the state patrol, or the military, in some situations where they brought military onto the campus, to simply squelch the demonstrations and the protests that were going on campus. But if the community was involved, then they had the support of the whole community behind them, and the leaders, black leaders, other religious leaders, and so forth, were able to buttress that move and to speak from a perspective of elders, again, who were viewed as being more respectful, more highly respected in the community, people who already had jobs, were professionals, et cetera, et cetera. So that was a critical piece to have the community involved. The one thing that I think has disheartened me over the last few years, last 10, 15 years in fact, has been the lack of student involvement in struggle for EOP and Africana Studies programs around the country. I am encouraged, though, however, by the Black Lives Matter movement, because very often you find that many of the students on the campus who are engaged in that kind of activity are those students who have come out of Black Studies or who have taken courses in Black Studies or Africana Studies, where their consciousness has already been raised about the issues and they simply join an organization. So the last point I want to make is it's critical for students when they engage in this kind of demonstration or protest or struggle for liberation, that it be in an organized way. That you can't do it as individuals, you have to work as a group. So student engagement has to come through some kind of organization, whether it's through BSU or some other community organization. It's essential to have those components in there.
Excellent. Thank you, Dr. Williams.
We're right into return. You want to keep this chronological or what?
Whatever you like. You're the senior.
Well, let me just say briefly what Celeste was pointing out just now about the struggle was not limited to CSUN, that it was national. I'm going to make the case that it was international. It was global. I went to school in West Africa, specifically Sierra Leone, many, many years ago. I don't need to tell you that. But while we were there, comparable struggles had been taking place as the ones that were taking place in the United States through the auspices of Nkrumah and Lumumba. In fact, there were groups, and I joined one of those groups called the Nkrumah Guards. And we were organizing protests on campus in Freetown, Sierra Leone, the University of Sierra Leone, which was one of the best universities in Africa, and the world, if I should say so. And we actually come from a society that allowed this kind of freedom of speech and allowed student activism to take place as long as Celeste was saying they were well organized and they were well orchestrated. So I have pictures of myself, in my garb, in my Nkrumah guard, with signposts and placards and yelling and screaming. And every time I go back and reflect on those days, I realize that what I was doing in the 60s in Sierra Leone was exactly what my brothers and sisters were doing in America. So there was that linkage. We didn't know that at the time. This linkage brought us together in terms of it being a globalized struggle. And I met Selassie about a few years later when he went to Freetown to do his doctoral research. And we started working on language and linguistics, etc., but not realizing that I knew as much as he does about the activist movement, simply because, you know, we have been so caught up in this experience itself. But so through our work, we were able to compare notes that what was going on in West Africa compares very favorably with what is going on in the U.S. The importance of me bringing this up is for you young people to understand that the struggle is a collective enterprise. It could happen anywhere. It could happen any time. And what I would like for you to remember, as Professor Dennis has pointed out, people went to jail in order for you to sit on those chairs today. And there are students who were barred from ever coming to this university simply because they participated in the struggle. There were those who never had the degrees, who were actually studying at this university, but never got their degrees simply because they participated in the struggle. The importance of that is that you must make a decision in order for change to take place. You can't sit on the fence and say, oh, well, you know, I'm busy today, I have a class, I have to go to work, because work may not be there for you if you do not take the responsibility of making change itself. So Selassie and I have been together for, what, more than 40 years now?
45 years.
45 years. And we have been working in various aspects of the struggle. And it is just one example of what could happen if young people take the responsibility of doing the things that will enhance the society itself, that will enhance your own productivity, that will enhance your own self-worth, many of which may not necessarily be there because you've been told so many times that, you know, you're a second-class citizen. And this is a good time for you to begin to understand that who you are matters. Who you are to yourself matters to what changes you can bring to the society itself.
And to segue right into what my two colleagues were saying, the struggle was definitely national and global. In 68, 69, in Florida, we were doing the same thing they were doing in Wisconsin that they were doing out here. Some people got arrested. Some people got kicked out of school. The aim was not just to raise hell. The aim was to force a change which recognized in education that every culture had made contributions to world progress. Everything was not centered around what white folks were doing. Some of what they had told us was simply not true. I was born and raised in a community that taught us that, number one, we were all here for a purpose. Our job was to use whatever we had, talent, intellect, develop, go out and get something done. You were supposed to be an activist. Whatever particular pathway you took, you were to use it to make sure that you helped other folk come with you. We called it lift as you climb. We had also been taught that the Carter G. Woodson book, The Miseducation of the Negro, had given us our marching orders, that our job was to learn how to correct the errors in our history that have been given to us by other people. So in the 60s, we were out as students trying to get that done. And of course, there will always be consequences. When you look at 2018 in CSUN, for the last 3 or 4 or 5 years on campus, I have not been all that enthralled with student activism. I mean, you party a lot, you know, you play a lot, sometimes you come to class doing it. But the students stood up and said no when the officials in Sacramento and in Long Beach said that they were going to close down a part of the curriculum that had been beneficial to students. Students stopped. Students gave faculty members a backbone that I haven't heard from these faculty members on this campus since I've been here. And the administration had to back up. Need to explain to you carefully that in this whole evolution, African American students, immigrant students, Latino students have always worked together. We used to be very, very close when we got African American Studies started, that then when Japan Africanism, as Professor Dennis always told me, then Chicano Studies started. And we had this real close connection. For some reason, we have allowed that to kind of deteriorate. We need to bring it back. I'm in the reparations movement, I'm in a whole lot of movements. One of the things that we are demanding is this acknowledgement of a wrong having occurred, and there must be some kind of atonement for it. Latinos in California, it's been interesting to have conversations with some Latino students who didn't know what I was talking about. The Latino students in California must be reminded of their own history in the 1930s. There was a major removal of Latino inhabitants of California because America was going through a depression, and when white folks get upset, they take it out on other folks. So a lot of Latinos were American citizens. They owned houses, they had jobs, out in the valley and other places. Y'all can't have jobs. You can't be doing well while the rest of America is falling apart. So they kicked a bunch of people out of here who had never even been in Mexico. You were not a Mexican citizen, you were not El Salvadorian citizen, you were American citizens, but they took your house and they kicked you out. So actually, Latinos have a reparations movement themselves right in California. And interestingly enough, you had legislators who have actually gotten legislation passed in California that California needs to acknowledge that wrong and correct it. It got passed twice in the state legislature and the state assembly. Arnold Schwarzenegger just put aside the document. We are now in the process of restarting negotiations with the Latino population in Southern California about this shared interest. We need to move together. There are simply things that involve all of us. EOP cannot be over by itself and not involve all of the students who basically have brought it to this point. I got hired on this campus as a full-time faculty and as the chair of Pan-African Studies by students. Students demanded that I come, otherwise I wouldn't have been here. The students have this power while you are still young, while you have this fearlessness to get stuff done. If you want things changed, you're going to have to be the change. You have to force people to pay attention to you. You have rights, but your rights mean nothing if you don't go out and force people to recognize them. If I'm in charge, I'm not going to tell you what your rights are. I don't want you to know. I can misuse you when you don't know. You must demand your rights. You must utilize your time while you're young to be as active as you can. You get to be an elder, your time for activism is basically gone. Y'all need to get this done now. Raise hell. Get people to pay attention to what you are here for. Make this place better. I think if Africana Studies has done any one thing consistently since the time that Professor Dennis was here when the whole department got started, is to teach young people to be activist scholars. Not to get information and just run away with it. Take it and use it. Shiva, Dr. William Watkins back here, who've both been here for a very, very long time, they can all testify to the importance of students remembering while you're young. If you don't raise hell, what better than being young?
Take a moment to acknowledge our Vice President of Student Affairs, Dr. William Watkins. Let me give him a round. And back there. Thank you, and we have Shiva Parsons here, Director of EOP. And we have Dr. Raquel Kidding, who's a faculty member in Africana Studies. Packet, Africana Studies. We have one of our senior lecturers, Deborah Cabranes, also here. All right, so I just want to just jump in just for a second, so then we'll move on to Professor Turner.
Dr. Williams, 1970 student.
Okay. This is true. David.
And I have to make a comment. I don't see a gray hair in his head.
So these gentlemen, and they've seen a lot more than I have on this campus, certainly in terms of student activism. But I want to give acknowledge to the activism, the robust and engaged activism that I was able to witness last year in response to Executive Order 1100. Students took to the campus, took to the streets, so to speak. They raised hell, as Dr. Horn would say, and they were actually very instrumental in moving forward change with our president on the campus. So I wanted to just and very, very proud to see that on campus. So, Professor Turner, having been a student on campus, what are your thoughts?
I am because we are. I came in as a student under Dr. Selassie, and Dr. Horn hired me, and I've worked under Tom. But more importantly, I'm a child of the 60s. I grew up watching the images of people who looked like me being brutalized on my TV screen. And that made an indelible imprint on my consciousness, so that when I reached adulthood, I was looking for the real. Unfortunately, it wasn't going on at the time for my generation in the way that it was in the 60s. So by the time I transferred, I was a transfer student from LA Valley College, non-traditional student, a widow with 2 children. By the time I came back to school, I was very angry. And I had a mentor by the name of Vern Bryant. And he asked one day in class, if anyone wants to be my assistant, you get an automatic A. And of course I raised my hand. And he later told me that he saw the pain, the suffering, the disillusionment in my eyes. And he knew I wasn't going to take any prisoners, and he wanted me on his side. And he ended up mentoring me right into a faculty position. I also, in communication studies, when I graduated with my BA, my intent was to go out and to get a job and to take care of my 2 children. I was offered a TA position by a faculty member and the chair of the department to go into the master's program. Initially I said no, because I was here to get a job. When I went out there, they weren't offering me much more than $32,000 a year. So I came back and said, now, what were you saying again? So I came in, and initially I came in for the money, until I remembered sitting in classes with young people like you and what it was like to experience life on this side of adulthood. And I developed an empathy that is driving my passion to this day in the classroom. Because yes, I'm a proud Matador. This institution gave me the tools and the resources to change my life. At that time, we had a black, our BSU president was Leslie Small. He's now a filmmaker. There were several other people, Darius Wiggins, I believe he's a minister. We were about excellence then, and we would take no prisoners. If there was anyone on this campus who was disrupting our process, we took the BSU meeting to them, because the decisions and their actions affected how we were able to move and breathe on this campus. We functioned as a community. The BSU was the umbrella organization for all of the black organizations on campus. We had some of the largest meetings and participation. And we were, I mean, it was really a different climate. So as long as I've been here, I was an advisor of the BSU for many years with Dr. Horn. And my passion has been to reignite that flame where we are no longer afraid to speak truth to power, because we have what it takes. I mean, I hate to throw this in the mix, but y'all done seen Black Panther. We gotta stop celebrating what we could be and be it.
Thank you very much, Professor Turner. Well said. So speaking of that, so we are speaking to millennials, people that are probably considered digital natives for the most part, right? But we still deal with the same sort of social injustice, political injustice. You know, attack on human rights, attack on voting rights, the prison pipeline, industrial complex. A lot of these same sort of charged issues are prevalent today, maybe even more so. But now there's a digital revolution. How can we utilize, how can we maximize, and anybody here, please respond to this. How has the digital revolution impacted the discipline in particular, and how has it impacted students' inability, assertiveness, or lack thereof, in terms of this activism and mobilization? What is the digital revolution? How has it impacted us all?
I'll make one quick answer, and it will be very quick. Here's the main difference between student activism now, student activism then. Even when we had opposition, both inside the groups and outside, we respected other people's point of view. It was not, you disagree with me, now I want to kill you. Now I want to talk about your mama, I want to come. You lost that respect. Now if you disagree with me, you the monster. You the gangrene, I have to get rid of. If y'all can bring that back, but all the social activism and all the Twitter feeds and the Facebook stuff, somebody's simply taking a different point of view than you take. Please be respectful enough to deal with, fine, you don't understand, or you don't agree with my point of view, but I still am willing to engage you in explaining what I'm trying to say. I don't have to try to take you out just because you disagree with me. Y'all can please get back. This disrespect is just not healthy for any of us.
When you look at the digital evolution, you see a shift in terms of how activism itself is enacted. It gives you a chance to organize without having to worry about moving from one place to another or trying to contact other groups to get together. You can instantly organize in ways in which would help the productivity of that activism itself. So that is very, very significant. But on the flip side of that is also you become very open and susceptible to blackmail, to the government listening to what you do, to people who do not like the looks that you have, to insult you. So the digital revolution itself can work but you should also be prepared for some of the negative consequences that come with it. However, a good activist who has actually thought about these things before they get into activism itself would be able to predict what kinds of reactions they're going to get and more or less prepare, to deal with those reactions as well. In the 60s, people did it a different way. Like when we organized in the 60s, the blacks and the browns and the sympathetic whites came together, each more or less trying to galvanize its own community to become part of that activism. But in the end, they all had the same goal in mind, a better society, an equitable society. So with your social media, you have to be able to use that medium in a way that would enhance the kind of activism that you want. I can't give you the answer because you know more about social media than I do. This is part of the creativity of young people, using a medium through which they can organize and using that medium through which they can respond to hate speech, to all kinds of things that may tend to derail the fact that you want change in the society itself.
I want to bank off of what Dr. Spencer Walter said earlier about the movement being international. It's international now with a whole bunch of splinter groups. And I really observed it most on Twitter during the Ferguson episode, when it wasn't just Black Lives Matter, it was a lot of other groups. And the philosophy is that you don't embody all of your eggs in a leader per se, so that when something happens to that leader, it mobilizes the rest. It's dispersed. And that's what makes social media and technology so powerful, because it can, it's attributed, Arab Spring is attributed to that type of organization, and all of the different kinds of worldwide changes and resistance movements. So I think it's a time, it's powerful. I think it's powerful. I think it is. I think young people are. This is their tools. This is their fight. Like I'm here beating this. Well, when I was a student here, we did this. They're doing their thing too. They're doing their thing.
And we want to hear from you. We're going to have some time for questions from the audience, so be prepared.
I think that's okay if you're all on the same track. But if you're all those different groups on different tracks, all you got is chaos. You have to have the same ideology that you operate from. And if that's not the case, you the crab in the bucket, you pulling everybody down. But I listen to the younger folks because when all the technology was coming on, I decided not to take advantage of it. So I don't even know how to cut on my cell phone. But what I want to say is that, let me ask you this question. We always had students involved in faculty meetings. The president of the BSU, the president of the PAC, Pan-African Council, had seats at the faculty meeting. So your students have seats. Do they come to faculty meetings?
They do not come to faculty meetings. They have been invited. They have not come just yet, though.
But
They're invited.
Okay,
Yes.
I'm glad to hear you say that.
I won't say all students, but the president of our league.
Yeah. Matter of fact, our code had that in there at one time. I don't know what it says today, although I got all 4 copies of the changes. So
We have used the
Yeah,
code
we
in a
feel-
while.
Huh?
We have used the code in a while.
Y'all call that?
I want to insert a question here because people ask myself and I think my colleagues often, and they ask each other, and parents ask their students that are coming here. So what does the 21st century Africana Studies degree look like? An educated student that has majored in Africana Studies. So why Africana Studies is oftentimes the question. Because we are dealing with a legacy of pioneers in this discipline, I would like to hear your response. So why Africana Studies? Let's start with you, Dr. Wood.
Critical piece is understanding of our history and culture, first of all. Seems like first and foremost, if you don't know your history, if you don't have the objective history in front of you, then anybody can lead you anywhere, just as very high-ranking official in the United States these days is trying to lead everybody down a primrose path because he keeps putting out historical inaccuracies. So it's not fake news, it's fake reporting from the top. But so the first part is knowing your objective history and culture. Secondly, I think, is understanding the political and economic dynamics that are at play within the U.S. context, but again, internationally as well, with global context. Those are two separate pieces. I think the history is one piece. You need to know your history of individuals, events, pivotal moments in history and so forth, but understanding politics and how that interfaces with economics and your personal and national finances is a critical piece. And I find that in too many Africana Studies programs, that piece is lacking. So there tends to be a heavier focus on literature and culture and the arts, which have always been a very vibrant means of communicating within our community and also across communities. But we tend to lack that more, I'll say rigorous, although that's probably the wrong word because I'm not trying to juxtapose the arts as being not rigorous. But there's a certain discipline that is required to understand politics and economics that too many people shy away from. And I think it's important for us to understand that because without that, we lack the power. So we may have the understanding of our history, but if you don't have the tools to bring about change in the political and economic world, then you really don't have much to work with.
Thank you for that. Anybody else?
We are actually in or moving toward a globalized culture. And when you're faced with globalized realities, you have to be able to respond to these realities with not only a sense of your understanding of academics, but your understanding of the nuances of cultures and histories that you're going to be faced with. To answer that question that you asked, in order for us to be able to educate our people so that they become participants of a global culture, we have to give them a sense of identity. A lot of people here, I mean, if you look at the schools themselves, they really don't teach slavery. They don't teach the enslavement of Africans in the way that we should be able to understand them. In fact, history is taught through only Martin Luther King. A department like Africana Studies should be able to take this case beyond this kind of simplistic renditions of history and culture to a place where they can participate in that global culture. I don't know how many of you know that Africa is the breadbasket of the world. It is. That's where math and science started. We should be providing that kind of academic leadership here in the department so that students will get the knowledge that is coming out of the continent itself. As Professor Williamson just said, the economics and the political realities must be taken care of. But we want to do that from the perspective of the continent itself. And if you look at what Africa has to offer the world now in terms of resources, everybody is flocking out there except us. Go and watch Black Panther.
Who's watched it? Who's seen it twice?
Go see it again. Go see it again. That is exactly what we need to be able to do with an Africana Studies degree.
Absolutely, thank you, well said, thank you.
I just wanted to add one other point that I think is lacking in a lot of Africana Studies departments. Even though we talk about Pan-Africanism and Africana Studies being inclusive of Africa, there's a tendency to talk about Africa only in terms of the great kingdoms of Africa, so the high periods of civilization and so forth in Africa. And we seem to have neglected focus on contemporary Africa. Not only is Africa the breadbasket of the world, it holds the resources, the central resources for the world, and everybody else is exploiting those resources. We don't even understand, most of us don't even understand what political and economic dynamics are taking place in Africa right now. So we only look backwards, we're not looking forward, and not looking at how to develop the skills that are needed to go back and transform, working with African brothers and sisters to transform that continent.
Absolutely, absolutely, agreed. Professor Turner? I'm sorry, Professor Turner, then Professor Turner.
I was going to say that it offers an opportunity to specialize on an untapped resource, as Carter G. Woodson discusses in Miseducation of the Negro. We come here and study these professions that are basically mainstream, and the job opportunities are sparse in reality, when in fact our resources and skills can be used to the benefit of our own people, instead of waiting for the government to lighten our load, etc. And that's one of the reasons why I'm so passionate about being at CSUN, teaching at CSUN for over 23 years, that I've been able to give back to the population that needed me most.
Excellent. So, people ask me that question often, and, as my colleagues have indicated, you all need to be prepared to operate as a global citizen, right? So you need to be able to hit the ground running when you leave CSUN. It's not only just a matter of having, critical, analytical, reasoning skills, quantitative and qualitative literacy skills, and media skills. But if you're in the marketplace, and all things considered, you're in competition with someone, I don't know, from Penn, from Harvard, from Columbia, the idea that you actually also have cultural competence, because if you can understand and appreciate the history of yourself, if you're from Black descent, or if you're from another culture, just understanding the history of people from Black descent, then you probably have the latitude to understand other cultures, other ethnicities, transgender cultures, women cultures, Native American cultures, and so that, I believe, makes you much more competitive, as opposed to someone who comes in with all the qualitative, quantitative, media kinds of literacy skills. So I always tell students, it's just one extra edge. And when you hit the marketplace, it is competitive. And so you have to have something interesting and something unique and something original. And not to mention, it heightens your consciousness. It heightens your level of awareness. It heightens your own sense of self, your own sense of self-esteem. So you bring to the table a sense of history that you can share in a production meeting that other people cannot necessarily share. So there's a variety of reasons why Africana Studies, I could go on and on and on, but I don't want to take too much time. But I just wanted to throw that in there. When people ask me that question, they think that, I'm going to study business. But as the economy changes, I know all kinds of MBAs. I know PhDs who could not get a job in business because the recession happened. So one shouldn't prepare themselves necessarily for the economy and where you think. One should embrace something that you appreciate and enjoy, because if you do well at it, I believe that you will get paid for your effort if you're passionate about whatever it is that you pursue and you pursue it with vigor. You had a comment?
Yes, I guess I can call it, I don't know what I would call it now, but what's happening to us in the Pan-African world today is that we're, all of these Africans in the United States don't have any relationship at all with African Americans.
We're changing that.
I think it's changing. I think that's changing.
We are changing. We're making a change.
And they say, y'all, I'm still alive. I mean, because I retired didn't mean I'm dead.
No, you're right. That is where it has been, but we are changing.
Well, the thing is until both Africans and African Americans, that we are all African. We're one African people.
So,
You know, whether it don't make any difference, because black folks I know ain't interested in Africa. And Africans I know ain't interested in America. Because, you know, Africans get a better break than we do.
well, that's certainly one perspective that I can appreciate, but I would say that there are multiple perspectives on that vantage point.
I'm not interested in multiple perspectives. I'm interested in what are we going to do in order to make changes that we didn't come here on campus so that you could get your degree and go out and be successful in the world. We came on campus for you to be the change agent. I'm here. One of the reasons I'm here this week is I'm calling our alumni together because they've been out working for themselves. But they ought to be the leaders. They ought to be the politicians. Politicians don't know anything about black folks, their own experience. But we know that that's not enough.
How many of you guys would say that you're a leader in this room? Raise your hand if you feel like you're a leader. Raise your hands high. Okay, all right, okay. All right, good. So we want to hear some things from the audience.
When you leave, you're going out there and leave.
I just wanted to make a comment.
You got to take it. Nobody's going to give it to you.
I wanted to make a comment to the perspective of what Professor Dennis was talking about in terms of African immigrants and African Americans. There's been some research out there that have indicated that the African immigrants, when they come into some of the Ivy League schools, they're taking the spots away from African Americans, and those administrations are touting that as a part of diversity in terms of the African American count as African immigrants. So I think that's what you were trying to say, right?
Let's get some questions from the audience. We have this panel of wonderful experts, and don't allow this opportunity to miss you. Yes.
I like this panel. I went to CSUN from 2001 to 2009 for sports psychologists. There was a professor here who went to say alma mater, Professor Warren. Shane Felix, he wasn't a brother, wasn't a black guy per se, however, he's very influential to everything that I stand for. I work with a few athletes, a few artists, with Golden State Warriors, do a lot of things to make sure their 9-loss season is relevant today. And just know that everything you do, coming from a coach, coming from a liberal representation of what being a centrist and being objective is being monitored, and it's expected to produce fascination from commercials, from advertisement. And when you don't do that, the rest of the country, the rest of the world holds you accountable, and they do it in a non-formal way, a polite way. And we have to push through that. Some people may see that as a barrier, some people may see it as being a sin or amoral, unethical. However, you have to push through that in order to be successful, because that's what we're here to do. That's what we're here to do. And I think the people on this panel are teaching us how to navigate through that conversation, through our responsibilities, and I think everybody should be applauded for being here.
There's a class that starts at 2 o'clock, so that's going to happen for the movement. But I did see another hand here, so be sure.
Hello, y'all can hear me. My name is Shantae, and I graduated in the spring of 2017. So several of my professors are here. I have 2 questions. First, I'll tell you what I'm doing. So at my daughter's elementary school, I made them books, and because I know that they only teach about Martin Luther King. And so what I did is I made them books to show them that there's people that look like them that have done things that they can learn about. And I make them a second book, reading personally. So I'm coming in from the elementary school level better as a mentor as opposed to being a teacher with 24 different attitudes that I ain't gonna be able. So I'm more of a mentor to them, and it's helpful that I make the books, and they are sharing it with their parents, which is great. So one question is how to expand that into the school system. So more, because I was a little stingy with it. I'm only for teaching Black kids. But I keep being told that more people need to learn more in order to accept it. So that's one. How do I get more embedded into the LMU? Two, what I've noticed is our people are falling off at the higher education level. So what I've done is I've reached out to LACCD and Valley and the professors that I know there and the administrators to get a hold of Dr. White because I'm trying to increase our presence here. So what I've done is I've reached out to them, but I don't know how to get them to respond back. So that's the second question. How do I get more people involved with getting more people in higher education and reaching our capabilities?
Two quick comments. Number one, you might want to start your own publishing. It's fairly easy to do that. And you can, let me say it this way, 50 cents is a solid publishing company. You can do one, anybody can do it. The other thing is you will contact those already in political authority like Dr. George McKenna or the LA University. And the third thing is run for office yourself. Change your political access. You now have leverage and authority over getting a bunch of stuff.
Good night.
One, two, three.
In terms of the first question you asked, use the resources we have here at the university. You write a book, a short book, share it with maybe faculty members here, see what they say about it, because we might have some opening, some access to publishing companies, and once we can give you advice on basically how to make it even better. Okay. So that when it gets out there, it becomes a definitive fact, of that historical experience. But don't try to do it by yourself, because it could be a frustrating.
Yes. A little bit.
What I was trying to do is get all our teachers together, all the ones who teach in schools, came through, took at least 6 units together, and that they form a core teaching. Well, whatever school they are in, they start. If they have trouble with the principal, then they'll find out how to deal with it. That was over at Cleveland, and that is, he's well known in the field. So I think we're gonna meet Saturday. After that meeting Saturday.
This Saturday.
Yeah, you know the difference between my answers and the younger folks' answers? I've been around here a long time. I'm 82 years old, but I know I won't be long around here long. And I'm gonna get out as much as I can because I'm gonna put the Washingtonian. Our department is Du Boisian. And if you don't understand the difference there, you really need to go back and read what Booker T. Washington. Because if you never build a foundation, you don't have nothing to stand on. And that's where we are in the 21st century. Nothing to stand.
I would like to ask also, because I know so many people are having to leave, but because we've had such an esteemed panel here, what legacy do you guys, do you want to leave? What are your words of wisdom? You guys could, each one of you, just share with the audience members. What legacy do you want to leave as it relates to Africana Studies, and in particular, some real nuggets and words of wisdom that we can use? We can use Dr. Horn.
Go ahead.
Please.
I leave you love.
I leave you agitation. is no progress without struggle. And I know the department is in very good hands. We got some people in this department who basically feel the same way. Professor Turner has been agitated. He tries to get all of you ready to go out and to do well. You asked a question before, and I want to make one very, very quick comment. One of the things that we do get from CSUN, Africana Studies and Africana Studies, I'm still Pan-African Studies, which are that you do get from that department, from both those departments, is enough information to be clear that you come from a cultural foundation that makes sure that you know that you are worth something. You are not from people who did nothing. You are confident and you are here to continue this whole progress because you are from something that gives you this self-worth. Keep that, move other people with that, so you can do anything graduating, understanding that you are from some good people, some people who worked hard, some people who produced you. You can go into any field once you are clear about that.
Absolutely.
I leave you with the legacy of the courage to create. And what I mean by that is, never be afraid to fail. Failure is part of life. It's what you do with it that makes a difference. If you're cowed by the fact that you failed and you just sit there, then of course you're going to be a failure. But if you let failure itself become a learning process for you, then you will succeed. The courage to create is to leave yourself accessible to every opportunity that requires change. So if you come into a roadblock, don't just cower there and sit back and say, well, it's over. Find a way around that roadblock. That's the only way you can succeed. The roadblocks are going to be there, either now or later on in life. The courage to create is what I give you.
My last word would be a luta continua, Portuguese for the struggle continues. You need to understand that the struggle for human rights, civil rights, humanity, and civility in this world is an ongoing struggle, and you have to struggle wherever you are. It doesn't end. You don't start a project or demonstrate for one thing and then go home and leave it all behind. So I've gone through the process. I was a student activist at the University of Wisconsin. When I became a faculty member at the University of Washington, I took on the administration there as a faculty member. Tom probably remembers me standing in front of the provost's office talking about his mama like a dog. And when I came here, as David Dorn was reminding us earlier, that we used to work together, Chicano Studies, Asian American Studies, Pan-African Studies at that time. And I remember very well having lunch with the chairs of those other departments one afternoon. And we were complaining, bitching and moaning about some of the decisions that were being made by upper administration and how it was impacting our kids, brown and black and yellow kids on this campus. And we vowed to each other that that the only way we were going to change those kinds of decisions would be for us to move to some of those positions, which was the only reason I moved out of the classroom into administration, because administration is not the most fun place to be. But anyway, so here I am provost, or recently was provost at Lesley University, recognizing the struggles going on, the racism still going on in the classrooms there, after all of these years of struggle in different locations and so forth. And I created there a task force on social justice in teaching and learning. And so I moved the struggle from being one of the marginalized communities fighting against the mainstream, if you will, at the university to try to bring the whole university focused on the issues. So we have faculty, administrators, and students all dealing with these issues of microaggressions and preparing faculty to deal with highly sensitive issues in the classroom and confronting racism head on from that perspective. So no matter where you are, whatever position you have, recognize that the battle isn't over. You still have other levels to move to.
I was telling my students of senior years here on campus that they were the changers, that they had to first become African American, black, whatever nationality. That's got to be the center of your thought. Other people will take care of themselves. Let them take care of themselves. You take care of yourself. And that they were the only people qualified to go out and be leaders in this community. And I'm saying to these young people here, you're the only ones who you take name me any politician you want, and I tell you what little they know about what's going on. I mean, they know how to run for election, and that you need to know how to do that too. But I was reminded that there's a city right down here, Compton, that they say is in a mess. So they hire family members and all that kind of stuff, not the best qualified and all that kind of stuff. And I suggested that they take over Compton, because they only take 3 votes on the city council to take care of Compton. It only took 4 votes on the Compton Community College to control that. You're not talking about a whole lot of people, but you have to live in Compton. But wherever you live, you become the leaders. That's what you got all of this information for, so that you will be able to lead the people out of the darkness of selfishness into the brotherhood or something I used to say. but my legacy is really, you become the leaders of Black America quick.
Two, 3 questions, and then we'll thank you guys for staying. We really appreciate you. Question here. Young was first, and then you. Yes, and a long time ago.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
Well,
Okay.
actually, it wasn't really a question, it was just
Okay.
a statement. I wrote it down because I talk a lot and I have a bunch of thoughts, so I need to be concise. Well, first I want to tell you all thank you for coming here and actually sharing your wisdom with us. And I say that to say, because Dr. Horn, you mentioned something earlier where you were like, we are the change, but the reality is, and we're learning that actually in Dr. Hackett's class right now, is that every person in the traditional African tribe played their role. Whether it was from a child, whether it was from the able-bodied men and women who can actually go out, hunt, defend, and then from the elders who actually gave back wisdom. So you all are still actually fighting the fight, and you're doing it because you're changing us and you're mobilizing us to actually go do the work that we need to do. So the wisdom is very beneficial, and like I said, I was really inspired by what you all gave. So thank you for that. And then I would say to my fellow colleagues is that the reality is there is a war effort, because you all mentioned the digital revolution, or not revolution, but a digital age of like activism. And there's really a war on us, because you also mentioned globalization, Dr. Spencer. And that's the war, because they've actually put the hard work behind what the effort into placing us in this position that we're in right now. And it's easy to become complacent because we're not going around, we're not being arrested for, like I was a part of the movement last semester too for the executive order. And we're not being arrested for that. You know, there's no real consequences. We're not being kicked out of school for that. So it's easy to take your life and be complacent, you know, and it's cool to, once again, it's a very effective tool using the digital age. It's very cool to create a meme or say, yo, support this, and not do anything. One thing, because I'm a marketing major, so I read statistics a lot in economics, so One thing I have found out is statistically, our generation is the most insightful and most knowledgeable because we have information on demand. But we're also the laziest generation because everything from apps has just made us a very lazy generation, but we know a lot. So once again, it's easy to get into the mix of talking about it and not actually doing anything. And once again, like I said, I mean, most people, it's not just us too. People usually become content and complacent when there is no real urgency or you're not seeing your friends being killed by a cop. I mean, we're seeing it, and we're seeing it on a different level because it's national. Once again, with technology, we can see a cop killing another. But that's been going on. It's just more exposed now because of technology. So I would urge us not to become content with that and understand that there is a war. And the biggest war is too, because with globalization, I always say that, like, you have to be able, like any relationship, if we're going to be in the global market, we have to know what we're bringing to the table. So if we know our history and we know that we're kings and queens and we know that we're worthy and our ancestors aren't just slaves, it didn't start with slavery. If we know we're something more, it makes it easier because the biggest issue comes in interracial relationships. My biggest thing is, for like a black guy, don't get in a relationship and dog out sister. It's cool to be with a white girl or like because I date all types of girls. But it's cool to be in a relationship if you don't lose yourself. You know, you have to know, it's one, like if you've been in a relationship to go find yourself and adopt another culture because you feel like yours isn't worthy enough, that's an issue. And that's self-hate almost. So but once again, with globalization, if you're going to work with, it's cool to work with other communities. And I feel like too, going back to even the communal aspect, you know, we're very communal people. We're a communal tribe. Africans are communal. Westernized nations think of individualistic things. Get your degree, move out, leave your family. Like I don't know any black folks that, unless you're in financial situations where you'll put your parents in a nursing home. That's realistically a westernized Eurocentric ideology. Get rid of my parents if not, you know. But if you're black, usually it's like, yo, grandma taking care of the kids. So hey, we don't got to get a nanny. Grandma's gonna take care of them. So once again, we're a communal society, and as far as for blacks in this room, we have to understand too that they were able to get us because they separated us. Because that's how you fight a war. You figure out where are people at their strongest point, and then you find a kink in the armor, then you go for that, and then you can separate people and then control people.
What's your name?
Julian.
Julian, what's your last name, Julian?
Thomas.
Julian Thomas. So you're a marketing major and an Africana Studies minor?
No.
Not yet?
I get it.
Not yet? Not yet.
They
You're trying to
tripping
work on
on
that. 'Cause
brother.
we
They
would like to
won't
have
let me
you,
do it.
we'd like to have you and some of the other colleagues in the room to be on the next panel, because we have lots to say.
Oh yeah, and I'm sorry, I'm talking
That's
too
okay.
much. Like I said,
Great
Thomas.
comment. Well, I think 3 more questions. I know that there's people that have a time schedule, so we're just going to line with that.
And my was just let you know that I'm grateful to come to CSUN, and like I said, I come through EOP. And through EOP, they taught us, you know, to build a community, and that's how I build a community. And I mean, my little sister right here at Blackboard's night, and she was like telling me, she said, "Hey, what are you taking up, brother?" I was like, you know, just always with, like she knew me. This is the first time I was like, "Hey, what's wrong with John?" I said, "Okay." She said, "What do you take up?" I told her social welfare, you know what I mean? She said, "Well, you got a minor?" I was like, "No." She said, "Whoa, Africana Studies." And I was like, okay, sister. She said, "Well, just talk to Dr. Hackett." And I talked to Dr. Hackett, and he put me right on in. And but through that, it was like through the networking and building the community that I learned about myself. And like Dr. Horn, Mr. Turner, you know what I'm saying, and a couple more teachers that I took in here, they taught me about myself, and then my teachers still teaching me and how to, you know what I'm saying, to go out into the world and be something to help somebody. Don't just, you know, take this knowledge that you're learning and just let it go to waste. You know, I was in Dr. Hackett's class, Turner, and they pushed me. And I'm still in Dr. Horn's class, and they push us, you know what I'm saying, and don't just you know, think it's nailed, you know what I'm saying, be broad about yourself, you know what I mean? And through that, I learned, you know what I'm saying, more about our history and ourselves and everything, and still learning. And matter of fact, through all my professors, they told me that if you do research, you say, get it published. You know, and at this moment, I'm in the process of getting rid of my research papers published. You know what I mean?
Excellent. My
name is Darwin D. Douglas. But I'm just grateful, you know what I'm saying, and I'm thankful through the College of Social Behavior is how I was able to get in here and learn and keep on learning and move on in life and meet a lot of people and go on. Like my sister right here, as I graduate, you know what I'm saying, we still communicate and we help one another, you know what I'm saying? And that's what it's about. Networking, it's like, but you know, sometimes who you know, you just don't come to school just to come to school because you be lost. You know what I mean? So I just want to thank everybody that's, you know, been a part of my life and continue to be a part of my life. And coming through CSUN from peers, you know, it's been a blessing, you know? Everybody's time to accept me.
That's terrific. You wanted to make a comment too? Two more comments.
Let me just say to you, well, let me just say this. When I left the chair in 1986, we had 211 majors. That's a way of doing that. We went out and we said majors and African Studies. When you get your degree, go on and get request for degree. They have on there, what do you want your degree to say? Well, you put sociology or whatever you major in then. But the department, the only thing that counts in terms of money and value for the department is majors. Second majors don't count. I don't know what mine is kind of, so mine is always mine. But anyway, you students help the department have a lot of majors. I know in the old master plan, when they cut down on colleges, on departments, the number of majors that they had. Now they're not gonna cut out anthropology, although anthropology in the past didn't have that many. That's something that they're going to keep, but you got a whole lot of new majors around here now that didn't exist too many years ago. And the English department has people with that. So you got to have a number of majors.
It's important. It is important. Well taken. Well taken. Somebody had another question. One more here, and then one more here, and then we'll unfortunately have to close it up for the afternoon.
So my question is, I'm Nigerian, like my parents are, and I'm like the first generation here, so I feel like I got to see like both sides of the season. But what I've learned is like, you think Africans have it better, but I would say growing up, black people like, they broke my self-esteem more than anybody because I would go to school, they'll make fun of my name. I'll go to school, you burn this, you burn that. Anyway, besides that, Africans also have their own preconceived notions of black people as well. But you have to understand that at home, they're going through everything that they're going through, and they're only seeing pictures of black people from what's on television. They don't get to see that we have a common struggle or that what we're going through on the continent is basically the same thing I'm going through in the neighborhood at English. They don't see that. It's to the point where I was living poor as hell, but my mom still had to send money back to her family because they don't see it. It doesn't exist to them. But what I was trying to say is like, I feel like one of my main missions in the world is to like try to bridge the gap between Africa and black people. And I just want to say I just want to know, how do I do that without stepping on either side's toes? Because what stopped me from going to the BSU meetings was they had an Ebola discussion. And then they put up all the memes and everybody started laughing. I didn't find it funny because at the time you're Nigerian, people got jokes for you every day. People asking you like, did you travel? Did you come? Like, you know, it's like something like that. So how do you bridge the gap without
get up there and say, hey, wait a minute, y'all. Hey, you got to talk to people. Maybe a lot has changed. I don't know whether I changed anything at all if I moved back to Texas. But people back to Texas, they slow, y'all.
That's real quick.
And so if you don't do it, you have to get up and say it. You have to stand up. The struggle, you can't go anywhere without struggle. And you may offend some on both sides. It's better to offend them and move up than keep your mouth shut and stay down.
Two quick answers to your question. Number one, you need to join the Model African Union.
The what?
Model African Union Club on campus.
FRS 466, A and B.
Which is about just what you're talking about. And the second answer, which will go back to something I wanted to say to Professor Dennis while he's still here. There's a whole movement about reconnecting the diaspora to Africa. The African Union has invited the diaspora to come back. Now clearly we've been working on it, we haven't gotten it straight yet, but here's one of the consequences of that movement that's all over this country. We are getting away from the term diaspora. We are saying there are global Africans. Only two kinds. Global Africans. Only two kinds. Those who live on the continent and those who don't. If you're African. And what we have to do is to work out how we can help that continent become the biggest, most important resource in the entire world. That's what the plan is. We can show you how to help you there. So we are working on that.
At the more micro level, you should never stop educating people about your culture.
And then how you also educate your culture on?
Well, allow them to have a conversation with you where you share information. You're not taking the role of I'm the teacher and you give this something. Have a conversation with them. Share cultures. You know what happens when certain cultural nuances happen in this culture, and what happens if you do it in that other culture, and you begin to understand. You know, between the two of you, that hey, you know, we have a common ancestry here. We have a common issue here. We have a common culture. You should never stop doing that. Because that's really what's going to help you and the people that you were trying to reach understand that we all come from the same culture.
Excellent. Thank you.
On Facebook, there's some criticism. I had to because the students took it all. I needed to get something to eat. But on Facebook, there are posts regarding Black Panther that Black people are appropriating African culture, which is insane because we too are African. When we get to that consciousness, when we start to see each other as cousins,
we're global Africans.
Absolutely.
One last question.
I want to take a group picture of whoever's here with the panel. This is very special. And you'll be a part of the historical legacy of this picture.
We're just going to allow one last question.
When it's for the students, you are the best place you can be for knowledge. But when you need this knowledge, you need understanding of this knowledge. And I challenge you to go out there and get some experience, because that's where you'll get that understanding of all the knowledge you've accumulated here. And we have to fight for that understanding. It's nothing that's going to come and walk up to you and sit down. It's something you got to go out there and see. All that you've learned here, you need to go out and understand it.
Put it into practice. Standing ovation for our panelists.